Hey guys, it's Maggie and I am back today to talk about some of my sickest, most sick, I'm not sure what's proper, moments throughout my life with having Crohn's disease. This actually was not an idea of my own. Zach came up with this because he said it could act as a message to what somebody with chronic illness actually experiences through their lifetime. So thank you, Zach. He helped me compile all of these moments that I'm going to share with you so I didn't miss any. And of course, I had to put on my brand new chronic illness champion sweatshirt, which I will put the link for below. I'll put the link for my stores that carry this shirt and a few other chronic illness gear designs that I've come up with, but I'm so excited. Anyways, let me share with you some of my most sick moments. Before I start this video, if you hear any background noise, I apologize. We are getting a new door installed and it might be kind of loud because it's loud for me. So I apologize for that. But let's get into my most sick moments. The first one starting off with one that was early on in Crohn's diagnosis. I had not had any surgeries yet. Really didn't expect this to happen. It's something that they warn you about that could potentially happen as a result of being on immunosuppressive medications. So at the time I was on mercaptopurine. That drug made me so sick. I am very glad that I am not on it anymore, and it is one of the more harsh medications for things like inflammatory bowel disease. It carries higher risk than something like Humira. I remember I got this weird rash on my side right here. Really weird rash that popped up, and I had just recently been playing with the next door neighbors on their trampoline, and the rash looked like poison ivy. I mean, to a T. It was identical to it. And so I wound up going over to the next door neighbor's house and asking the little girl if she had poison ivy or if they had seen any in their yard, and maybe that's, you know, how I got it. And somehow it got on the trampoline and I was jumping on the trampoline. And the little girl said yes. So we assumed it was poison ivy. And I kept telling my dad, this really hurts. And he said, no, poison ivy is itchy. Like, it should be itchy. And I said, Dad, it's not itchy at all. It really hurts. It started off with just a couple of little dots. And Zach is very allergic to poison ivy and it looks the same, at least to me. Started off with a couple of dots that were really painful, and then it just spread into this nasty rash that was oozing fluid. I just so happened to have a GI appointment coming up, so when I went to the GI appointment, I remember breaking down crying on the doctor because my skin hurt so bad. And she was like, oh, that's probably shingles. It's something that you hear on like medication commercials. You may be at higher risk for shingles, and there's now shingles vaccines. I don't know if that vaccine was available at the time, to be honest with you, but I wound up being diagnosed with shingles. It was very painful. They actually did give me pain medication because it goes along the nerve endings, so I do have a scar to this day from it. I'll transpose it over this clip right now, but yeah, it was very painful, and so now anytime I get a bump, I'm terrified that it's shingles. The next instance was actually my very first hospitalization. I've shared it on this channel here and there. I've told you about when my Crohn's started to get worse and I started noticing that my stomach was getting bigger, I couldn't eat, I wasn't going to the bathroom, and how my GI doctor, who's supposed to know these things, didn't catch that I was obstructed. Well, that all culminated. I was not able to go to the bathroom for months because of what was going on in my intestines, and I wound up in the ER because of it. I remember shortly before this, I think it was like 2 days before I wound up in the ER, we had homecoming, freshman year. I went to the dance and you could just see my belly was all swollen in the picture. except nobody like caught on. I remember feeling miserable that night at the dance where everybody was dancing and I was kind of just like, ugh. I just felt terrible. So wound up in the ER because I was having contraction-like pain, and they actually did a pregnancy test on me because they didn't know if maybe that could have been it. They thought maybe it was the appendix. They weren't really sure, but it wound up being that I was so backed up and my intestines were trying to move old food through but couldn't, that it was like spasming my intestines. Oh, it was terrible. And that is ultimately when they found out that I had my stricture in my rectum, and it took a long time for them to figure that out. Unfortunately, what happened in the ER is that they gave me a lot of pain meds, so I felt a lot better, and then a nurse or a resident, I'm not sure, I think it was maybe a resident, came in to examine my bottom, stuck their finger up there, and I didn't feel any pain. I'm really surprised though, because it was very tight. It was a very small hole at that point. So I don't know why they didn't say anything then. But then after telling, I don't know how many people, my dad explained the story of what I experienced to probably 50 people. I remember sitting in the hospital room. I was there for a week. They had me on TPN at this point. I had a PICC line because I couldn't eat anything. They had me on, NPO. My surgeon, who I had not met at that point, walked into the room, and my dad explained the story to him, and he goes, "Why didn't you tell anybody this?" My dad said, "I've explained this to everybody." And my surgeon said, "I think I know what's the problem." And he came over to me, he did a rectal exam, and immediately I screamed out loud because I wasn't on pain medication anymore. It hurt very badly, and he said, "Well, I know exactly what's wrong. We're going to book her for the OR as soon as we can. We're going to try and dilate that area, and we'll see if that helps." And it did. It was amazing. I was able to eat. I went to the bathroom for the first time in months, and I just felt so incredible. Of course, that led to a lot of dilation surgeries that I had to have. I had them every few months, like every 3 to 4 months. And I also was drinking prune juice and taking laxatives like crazy to make it easier for me to go to the bathroom, which was not fun. My third and probably most serious chronic illness catastrophe, I guess that's a good word for it, is a couple of years after the last one. Finally went in to get some of the narrowings in my intestines because I actually had 3 strictures total. Had that done, and about a week after that surgery, they had me eating normal. I was actually feeling pretty good, minimal pain. I ate a chicken fajita, and I don't know if that's what did it. Maybe they had me eating too early, or the fact that I still had the rectal stricture in there. My intestines fell apart inside of me. I remember nurses coming in asking me, like, "Are you feeling okay? Are you in pain at all?" And I didn't want to go back to the OR. I didn't want to be there anymore. So I was lying and saying, like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm totally fine." Except it felt like a fire was being lit inside of me. When they finally figured out what had happened, there was some bad accident where a few other kids were needing surgery before me. And I remember being in pain that whole day. They knew what was going on, but they couldn't take me down to surgery just because they weren't able to. I remember sitting in a chair trying to watch TV. My dad was playing with my hair to try and distract me. And something about peritonitis, which is what was happening, it's basically inflammation of your peritoneum. You get into a fetal position because that is the most comfortable for you. So I was like, I had my legs up here, and your stomach gets rock hard. So those are the 2 signs of it. And I just sat in a fetal position all day waiting for them to take me to surgery. They finally were able to take me down to OR waiting, and that is where I don't know if I passed out, but my memory was basically me sitting in a small room. It looked like an extra room where they kept stuff, like it was a storage room basically. I remember conveniently there being all of these vomit buckets, that's what I call it, the pink bucket things being lined against the wall, and out of nowhere, I hadn't thrown up yet, and I said, "Dad, get me one of those. I'm gonna need it. I'm gonna need it quick." And I started throwing up stool. It was black, there was blood, it was horrible. Thankfully, I don't remember much after that because they must have A, given me drugs, B, I passed out from shock, C, I don't know, they took me into surgery maybe. But I didn't get out of surgery until very late that evening. And that's when they did my ostomy and I got my big midline scar and they had to basically hose me out because there was stool everywhere inside of me. And it's a miracle I survived. Number 4 actually happened very soon after. Obviously not as serious as my intestines breaking down inside of me, of course. But number 4 happened about a week after ostomy surgery. I started to get a lot of pain after this surgery. Not anywhere near what peritonitis felt like, but it was still horrible and I was so uncomfortable. And I remember coming back down to the OR, waiting for them to be able to take me in because it was another busy day, and just being like, Dad, they gotta knock me out. They gotta give me something. Somebody's gotta knock me out. This is one of the few times that this happened. I remember my dad being able to come back to the OR with me. I don't know why it was allowed, but they did get me up on the table. He was next to me as I fell asleep for that surgery. I don't know if it was special circumstances because they thought maybe something else was going on inside of me and they wanted, him to be there. But it was very comforting at least. And what they found, thankfully, was not nearly as serious, but I did have a pretty bad abscess, which understandably I would get because of all the things that they had to do inside of me. So what they did was they put in a JP drain. That relieved a lot of that pain. I did have the JP for, I want to say 3 to 4 weeks after that. Thankfully it was removed before discharge. The next one I maybe have told on here in passing. This one happened about a year after ostomy surgery. So I had mentioned previously that between them finding my stricture in my rectum and me having ostomy surgery, I was getting a dilation procedure where they would put me under anesthesia and basically put a balloon dilator into my rectum to dilate it back open. I had this done every 3 to 4 months. It was very helpful. But once I got my ostomy surgery, I stopped getting that procedure, even though I still had that stricture, I still had my colon. Personally, I think that this was a fail on the medical team. Somebody should have told me, and this is why I always tell people, if you still have your colon, if you still have your rectum, it makes mucus. And that mucus will build up if you are not passing it. So you should still be sort of going to the bathroom. Even if you have an end ileostomy, there still should be stuff coming out of you. It might not be a ton, but every few days, every few weeks, you should get a little bit of mucus out. Well, I wasn't because I had a stricture. I didn't know that this mucus was building up. So I remember suddenly getting very sick my senior year of high school. Essentially what happened was I felt kind of blah. It wasn't like I felt terrible, but the serious thing that was happening is that my ostomy stopped putting out and couldn't figure out why. Couldn't think of anything that I had eaten that would block me up. So I was very confused and I wound up going to the doctor. They planned a stat CT scan, and the weird thing that happened, it was very unfortunate in timing. I had, I believe it was just IV contrast for this CT scan. And when they gave me that, whatever it was that they gave me somehow relaxed my intestines enough that during the CT scan, my ostomy bag filled up 3 times. And they were like, oh, you're fixed. Like, it's moving again. You're having output. I felt a lot better. I was like, okay, guess we can go home. As soon as we went home, nothing was passing through. Started feeling nauseated again, and my stoma stopped working again. So we went back, wound up in the ER, I believe that time. I can't remember if I was admitted or if I avoided that somehow. But somehow they figured out that my colon had filled with mucus. And they said it was 700 milliliters of mucus. So they wound up doing a dilation procedure, drained all that mucus out, and my stoma worked again. Apparently the colon swelled enough to the point where it blocked off my small intestine. Crazy, but we learned from that point that I need to make sure that I'm getting mucus out. I don't know how often I had the dilation surgery after that. It wasn't nearly as often. I think it was like maybe once a year we'd go in with my colonoscopy. And then it got to a point where it was like it was almost scarred open so I could pass it, at least enough to keep my stoma working. I got a little bit of a break. I got about 1.5 years break from hospitals and feeling sick, but my freshman year of college, It was spring break. I was dating an old boyfriend at the time, and I remember we went to Virginia Beach, had a great time, but somehow I picked up a virus. The night before I actually got sick, I remember telling him, because I think he was over the house, I said, you know, I don't feel quite right. There was nothing major that was happening. I said I felt a little nauseated, but you know, that isn't super uncommon with me. I don't feel very good. I want to like lie down and just sleep. And I woke up the next morning puking my brains out. I threw up so much. So much. And my ostomy was putting out so much, I mean, just water. And I probably emptied 15, 16 times that day, a full ostomy bag. And I remember my boyfriend at the time coming over to see me later the next night. And when he walked in, his face just like, he was terrified because I looked so bad. I actually lost 7 pounds of water weight because of how much fluid I was losing. So we did wind up going to the ER. I remember like throwing up in the waiting room with all these other people around. I couldn't help it. I was just throwing up so much. And yeah, wound up being in the hospital for a few days. I do think I made a video. It was around the time that I was starting this channel, so I think I did make a video just saying like, hi guys, I'm in the hospital from astrovirus. That's what it was. Oh, that one made me so sick. So I was on IV fluids. I got really weak, and I remember going back to school and being very weak still. I was so embarrassed. A friend invited me to go to our cafeteria. It was a little bit of a walk from our dorm room to the cafeteria, and I actually had to hold on to him because I was so wobbly and so weak, so he like walked me to the cafeteria. I did gain my strength back pretty quickly, like I was able to rehydrate and all that, but yeah, that was a scary one. That is why I'm terrified of any type of stomach bug. There was the one Christmas that Zach wound up getting norovirus, and I don't know where he got it from. I was worried he got it from me because it seemed like there was always a patient on my floor where I worked that had norovirus during the winter time. I was afraid he got it from me, but I never got it, and I avoided him like the plague. I was bleaching the whole house on Christmas Day. I was like, I'm not going near you. I'm not getting this because I will be in the hospital if I get this. And somehow I avoided it, so it worked. It worked. And then the final one. The final one was probably my second most serious. That was the whole kidney debacle that I didn't know was my kidney. I had pains that felt like they were right behind my stoma, so I assumed for a long time that I was having random blockages, except they were not intestinal blockages. These were urinary blockages. And I went on for so long just dealing with the pain. Like, I found that positioning helped me feel better. Certain things that I drank, or if I drank too quickly, would make me feel worse. I should have put 2 and 2 together, but I didn't. I truly thought it was my stoma experiencing a blockage. And I remember recently telling this, that I suddenly was getting nauseated out of nowhere, got the shot of Phenergan in my butt from a friend down the road who had worked at my doctor's office, and that made me feel better, but didn't know why I was nauseated. But it soon came to light because I got really, really sick. I told you that my temperature was like 98. And I was like, oh man, that is high for me. And Zach kind of not believing me. He's like, you're fine. It's a 98. That's lower than what typically people are at temperature-wise. And then my temperature shot up out of nowhere and wound up in the ER. My heart rate was through the roof. And I think my blood pressure was either really low or really high. I can't remember. And they found out that I had gone septic because of a kidney infection. The funny thing about that was I did not know it was a kidney problem because, you know, I was urinating, not a lot, obviously, because I was so sick. I wasn't drinking a ton, but when I was urinating, it was yellow. It was normal. And as soon as I got to the ER and they wanted a urine sample, oh my gosh, I remember going into the bathroom, peeing, and it burning for the first time. It had not burned at all at home. Maybe I was too out of it at home, but I got a urine sample. It burned coming out, and when I looked at the cup, it was red. So I walked out to the nurse. Actually, I walked out to my dad first, and I held up the cup, and I said, I'm thinking it might be a kidney problem. So I didn't know until that moment. I'm like, of course it waits till now, till I'm like in the ER sick, instead of like me being at home, recognizing that and going to my doctor. But yes, anyways, wound up being in septic shock. Sepsis can be really horrible. It can have long-term effects. I'm very fortunate that it did not. But yeah, that was a rough ER visit because, and this was before the pandemic, okay? The ER was so backed up. I mean, backed up, that I was in an extra, almost looked like a storage room. I didn't have a real bed. I slept on a gurney that night. There were patients lining the hallway all night long. I remember that they were giving me fluids, and when I get fluids, my ostomy tends to put out a bit more. My bag leaked down my freaking leg. There was no bathroom in the room, so I had to walk down the hallway with my bag leaking down my leg and my gown. Changed my bag. Thank God I brought ostomy supplies, because there was no way. Like, I barely saw my nurse. I felt so bad because she was so overworked. Barely saw her, so I was kind of on my own. And eventually I did get a room. I got a room on the trauma floor. So I had a few wonderful nurses. I had one bad nurse. So those are my stories with being really sick while having a chronic illness. And it goes to show you that you really, need to listen to your body really well, because in most of my instances where I got really sick, there were little warning signs, just slight little like, ooh, I feel funny, little warning signs that I should have paid more attention to, and maybe I could have avoided a more serious illness. Which is why now I feel like sometimes I'm crazy, because any little symptom, I'm like, ooh, gotta pay attention, because we don't know what's gonna happen. We're gonna keep our eyes on this one. It's for good reason though, clearly, because how many times have I had it where a small symptom led to something way more serious? And it's also a good reminder that chronic illness, while somebody can appear healthy and great and just doing awesome things, there is a serious side to it, and they can get sick. And it's a good reminder to Zach that, I can get really sick. I can also do really well like I am now, but I can also be really sick, and I always appreciate his support through all of those moments, because they are not fun. Anyways, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Hopefully it's not too long, and I hope that you are feeling good, and I'll see you in the next. Bye, guys.